What is up, everybody? My name is Aaron Canole, and welcome back once again to another edition of the movie Battleground. We are here for the third matchup of our 2022 tournament. As I said, we have 16 of the top players in the league competing off against each other to make it all the way to that title shot. And tonight we have fortunately for both of them, probably two of the least experienced people in this tournament, just in terms of games played, pairing up against each other. We have Dr. Spaceman, Alan Shepard, in the number 12 seed, going up against Alex Martinez, who is the newest of all the players in this tournament, coming in at the number 5 seed. I'm not going to waste anyone's time at home. Let's just go ahead and get to this and introduce our first competitor with a record of 2 wins, 1 defeat. He is Dr. Spaceman, Alan Shepard. Alan, how's it going? Welcome back, sir.
Aloha, doing well. I'm glad to be here. I just got off. I'm still at work, actually, because it's only, about 4:30 here in Hawaii. So still early for me, but doing good. Glad to be here. And I'm always just here to have fun. So let's have fun.
Absolutely, man. Just kind of general, how are you feeling going into this about yourself, your opponent? It's been a bit since we saw you. The last time you were here was when you took on Chad Webb. Unfortunately, of course, that didn't end your way. But does that affect you at all coming into this?
Nah. I mean, again, I'm here always to have fun. So win or lose, I'm just here for it. To be honest with you, I don't know much about Alex as far as his style, what's going on. So yeah, I'm gonna learn today, just the same as everybody else.
All right, man. Well, I'll go ahead and put you in the back. Thank you, sir. As I bring in your opponent with a record of 1 win, no defeats, he is Alex Martinez. Alex, welcome back, sir. So there's really only one question, and it's kind of just generally, how do you feel coming into this? I'd say that you're the least experienced competitor in this tournament, and that you only have 1 match under your belt. Obviously, you won that match. And even though Alan does have more experience than you, Ryan was no rookie in terms of he's played before. He just didn't have a record. So how are you kind of feeling about Alan in the second match?
I mean, it's round 1 of the tournament, so I don't think I have expediently high hopes just yet. I think if I make it to rounds 2 and 3, then we can start worrying about experience, style matchups, and all that. For right now, it is just can I take Alan out?
All right. Fair enough. Short and sweet. I'm not going to go ahead and pull in your opponent, guys. Let's hop into it. Movie Battleground is a game that is a best of 5 rounds. It is the first of 3 points will win the match. Each round is worth 1 point. If a competitor happens to take the first 3 rounds in a row, that will be a victory by knockout. If at the end of 4 rounds it is a 2-2 tie, that will activate the blind round, but we'll worry about that should we have to deal with it. In terms of how the game works, the competitors were given the questions ahead of time. They've had their opportunity to prepare as much as they feel they need to or could. Life happens. But the way that it's going to work is they will get 60 seconds to open up their argument, followed by 2 minutes to expand and speak on it. Then there will be a 4-minute open discussion where they'll go back and forth and get in as many points as possible, and then a 60-second closing argument to wrap up. Following that, backstage, I have Chris, Zach, and Andrea here. They will come in, and based on what was said by the competitors in the round, they will make a deliberation on who wins. With that said, guys, it's great to have you both back. Do I have any questions, or are we good to begin?
Let's do it.
All right. So let's go ahead and hop into it. And first things first, we are going to hop into something that we have never discussed here on the movie Battleground, but it is something that is being prevalently discussed in the film world, whether it be the, whatever the fuck you want to call it, Pinocchio remake, or the, I'm going to go with unfortunate reaction the internet has had to the Little Mermaid's trailer. Disney's live action remakes have been a focal point throughout most of the 2010s in terms of, are they good? Are they bad? Do they need to exist? Is it just a company trying to shell itself out for money, or is there some artistic merit here? But with that said, they're not all critically reviled. In fact, I would say a large proportion of them have received good reviews, all things considered, even if there's a vast amount of dislike against them. So the question here is, what is the most overrated of these Disney live action remakes? That said, behind the scenes, Alex, because you were deemed the favorite based on record, you have the choice of whether to go first or on what questions at least. So you're going first on 2 and 4, which means, Alan, you will be up first on this question. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys your timer, and I'm going to wish you guys both the best of luck. Alan, when you are ready, it'll begin.
All right, I'm not the hugest fan of these Disney live action remakes. I think there are a couple that are pretty decent, but I went into this one because everybody that I had talked to that had seen it said that it was actually really good. And a lot of the reviews were saying, hey, this isn't bad. It's actually pretty good. And that when I actually did see it, I went, oh, no, I'm so sorry. You are incorrect. And then I started finding more reviews that matched my opinion of it. And that is the, I think, horrific, awful, terrible, completely not should have ever been done remake of Aladdin. A really, really, really bad misfire on all counts. And so I think I'll save the rest of my time for the other discussions. But yeah, Aladdin, I think, very overrated and quite possibly the worst thing I've ever seen.
High praise from Alan there. All right, I jumped ahead a couple seconds by accident, but Alex, you will get those back, of course. The timer will metaphorically start when you begin speaking.
Right. Overrated meaning rated or valued too highly, of course. It's an interesting question because, of course, it's also a question of opinion, right? Because you have to decipher which one of these you either like it or you don't. For me, I would say that one of the interesting things that we go back and re-evaluate movies quite frequently. So for me, it's interesting that there is a movie that came out in the 90s, so plenty of time for people to have grown up and revisited, that has an 80% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes and doubled its money back at box office, that we have completely left behind the dust to be like, it's just sitting there with people's fond memories of it. But no one's gone back to really look at or think about Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book, the 1994 adaptation that is actually of both The Jungle Book and the second Jungle Book, following Mowgli as a child for a bit and then as an adult. It is one of the most latent pieces of Disney adaptations ever brought to film, and it actually sets a bad precedent.
And time. All right. And then, as I am prone to do whenever there's an answer that somebody in the comments might try to opinionate on, Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book is actually considered the first Disney live-action remake, even though it was made before the year 2010, which is when Alice in Wonderland came out. Both this film and actually the two 101 Dalmatians films are counted by Disney as a part of their live-action remake series. So with that said, it does count Aladdin versus The Jungle Book, but not the one you're thinking of. Alan, you're up first. 2 minutes on the clock.
All right. The reason I think I chose Aladdin is because I think, and they called it a misfire, is just because there's a lot of talented people behind this thing, and they have all done much better work on previous films. I mean, Guy Ritchie, an amazing director, has his own vivid visual storytelling technique, can really choose a great cast to tell a compelling story, and didn't with what should have been, a story that has already been told a bunch of times. And they had a good ground plan, a good framework with the cartoon version, the story they were telling of this Aladdin. I don't think any of Guy Ritchie's visual flair was able to be forefront in this movie, so it made it really kind of boring to look at. I mean, colorful, yes, it was very colorful, but everything looks CGI. I mean, and we can't even begin to discuss the genie and how they had to redo the genie for that initial trailer that tried to make the genie more lifelike. And then they said, oh, no, that doesn't work. It's disgusting, scary, and kind of brought back, not brought back, but put forth the Sonic Eyes version of having to redo CGI that looked really, really terrible in the initial trailer. And they had to redo it for it, and it looked CGI the whole time. It did not look lifelike in any way. And that's wasting a good actor in Will Smith. I mean, say what you want about an award show, but he's a decent actor, good performer, and he was just wasted. And again, you couldn't really, it took that believability out of it. I mean, it was already big shoes to fill in when he had to jump in to do take over for Robin Williams in that role. But just, again, another misfire. A good actor not able to do what he was able to do or can do, his potential, and a director not able to do his potential in just a thing that just shouldn't have existed. I mean, this remake should not have happened. We didn't need it, and nobody was able to shine the way they were supposed to make a good, compelling telling of this story. And one second.
Time. All right, Alex, back over to you.
Right. Like I said, the Jungle Book Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book, that I should say, is the like oddball of the Disney canon in that it is both incredibly ahead of its time as a Disney remake, being the first one, and having a critical place that has been left entirely unexamined. It is, talk about a cast of stars, a supposed waste of Will Smith, for example. I can tell you that in Rudyard Kipling's, and this is again from the 90s, you're talking about actors like Sam Neill, up and comer like Lena Headey. John Cleese was in The Jungle Book, among actors that are not native to the United States, but would be famous all around the world. These are actors that were just put in a soft adaptation, a soft bloated adaptation, because once again, they've adapted both the Jungle Book and the second Jungle Book. It is just a really confused, boring, melted movie that was made kind of as a technical exercise to see if you could do it, kind of like a backdrop of it. And it ended up being fairly popular at the time, but has since kind of been left in the aftermath, which is interesting because we've remade the Jungle Book a few times since then, and not anybody really has gone back. Even, I mean, that's what we do now pretty much all the time. Is, I mean, if I go back and if I go check Twitter right now, I'm done in a couple days, I'm sure that I could see a thread about how Andor recontextualizes Rogue One in this specific way because of a line so and so says, and that's just something that we haven't done with Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book, probably because there wasn't much there to begin with. It was made purely to see if we could do it, if it would work. And while some at the time believed it did, the fact that we haven't caught up with it means that it was ultimately an empty exercise.
All right, and that will be time on the 2 minutes. Guys, we're going to go ahead and go into the 4-minute open discussion. As always, friendly reminder, while you guys are competing to get your points in, be respectful of each other, give the other person time to speak, and try not to talk over each other too much, but, the more the merrier. That said, time starts when the first competitor speaks.
I'll say with the Jungle Book and saying, see if they could do something with, again, making lifelike animals. I mean, I dare kind of call this a live action remake when the only thing alive was the kid. Everything else was CGI. But I thought actually the one thing I was really surprised with the Jungle Book was everything looked pretty lifelike, looked pretty good. I thought Bagheera looked great. And I thought, King Louis was fantastic. I thought that they all looked very, very good. As far as the animals and the environments. It was kind of really interesting to see, okay, where can I see the seams? And I didn't really see the seams all that much. So I found it compelling to watch. I don't think I was bored. Like you kind of referenced it was being a boring film. I knew the story. Sure. I thought, the original version, the animated one was more fun. But I didn't find this one boring because it was so compelling to look at. Because I thought they did a great job with making those environments look lifelike. And looking at those animals very lifelike and looking really, really good. And I was pleasantly surprised with Ka, with Scarlett Johansson, because I was, well, is this going to work? But I really liked that scene. And I thought she did a very good job with the vocal work. And the King Louis, want to be like you, I thought was a great addition. And then it kind of added a nice touch to it.
So not for nothing, but you're talking about how interesting it is to look at. That is something that someone could say of the remake of The Lion King. That is not to say that The Lion King is a good movie. That's to say that it's interesting to look at. Quality is not measured in how interesting something is to look at unless we're talking about purely a still motion piece of art. You couldn't tell me anything that happens or you couldn't give me any specific lines from Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book outside of anything that was in the original because content-wise, it is ultimately unimportant. We might as well have watched Gus Van Sant's Gus Van Sant Psycho. That is not to say that is a bad movie or a good movie. That is to say that at the time when Gus Van Sant's Psycho came out, it was treated as a bad movie because it was just a reimitation of basically a shot-for-shot remake of Psycho. I don't know that that's that salient of a point. What I will say, being overrated, The Jungle Book is... Again, we kind of rediscover movies all the time. It's one of the things that we do here is go back and re-examine. One of the things that for me kind of stands out is the point that maybe this Rudyard Kipling's The Jungle Book isn't good. Maybe it came out when enough people were 8 that they saw the Jungle Book and they were like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember seeing that when I was a kid. And film critics at the time were like, you know what, this was fine. Maybe you know what, maybe you're right. Maybe it's just visually interesting to look at. And they were like, oh yeah, I remember this song. That's neat. I also think maybe you watched the wrong adaptation of the Jungle Book because you said Scarlett Johansson. Did you watch the Jon Favreau?
Well, she wasn't Ka in the. Oh, she was in the Jon Favreau one. That's right. Yeah. Well, I still liked the snake. I remember the snake. Who was the snake in? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Oh God, I mixed those two up. You're right.
Right. Meaning, so
with that the version of, if I'm going to choose a version of the Jungle Book based off of nostalgia, if I'm introducing it to somebody else, then I'm going to go with the animated one. But if I'm going to introduce it to my kids, I'm going to show them the live action one because they're more used to that now. It was the groundbreaking at the time. And that story, I mean, the Jungle Book story is a story that's been told a million times. There's a million different versions of it. But I'm going to go with this version now rather than the original animated one because it's compelling. I'm never going to show anybody the live action Aladdin because it cannot be held a candle to the original animated one. So there's really no point in that. So overrated being that, why would anybody waste their time watching this live action version?
And time. All right. So I do just want to jump in here just because there was a little bit of confusion mid-round, so I want to make it clear to the judges as well judging. The answer that was submitted is the 1994 first live-action adaptation of The Jungle Book, not the 2016 one.
Not the 2016 one.
By Jon Favreau. Again, just so the judges are aware of which version is being argued, there was a little misconstruing there. That's it. Alan, you are up first for the closing, so when you are ready, you have a minute on the clock.
When we are talking about overrated, a lot of people just again, I believe the score for the live action Aladdin, the audience score was in the 90s, and so I think that's just abysmal. I found nothing compelling about this movie. I don't know why it needed to be remade. With the live action version of the Jungle Book, you've got to remake a story like that. It doesn't hurt it to remake it because there's no definitive version of it. I mean, there were, I think it was 20s version of that story. Aladdin, then the version that Disney told, that original animated one, you didn't need to remake it. You didn't need to touch it. It shouldn't have been done. And they didn't improve upon it. They did nothing to it that added to it. None of the actors were very compelling, very interesting, and are better than the voice actors in the original. And visually, it was really, really hard to watch, and I think a muddled mess. So it doesn't really make anything compelling or add to the story.
All right, and then Alex, you have the final minute.
Yeah, I would say that I wholeheartedly disagree. I think that while Guy Ritchie's style maybe not necessarily in mind the best fit for it, he does bring a lot visually, dynamically. Maybe didn't get enough out of it that he wanted, but I will say that casting choices like Naomi Scott, Mina Massoud, and yes, even Will Smith as the genie, you don't want to just get Robin Williams again. You do want someone that can bring something to that performance. Will Smith is, in fact, one of the most charismatic actors that we have working, well, not necessarily working today, but he was one of the most charismatic actors working at the time, and he brings something that Will Smith could not. He is, in fact, a trained actual musician, and he was actually able to lift those songs. And Mina Massoud and Naomi Scott were able to bring those characters to life because they actually resemble those characters. And when you see those two singing A Whole New World, it actually does bring you back to what the original intent of Aladdin was. And yes, it isn't the child's animations movie, but you know what? Neither is the Jungle Book. And ultimately, a lot of people really, 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 really hated Aladdin.
And time. All right. Good first round, guys. I'm going to go ahead and sit you both in the back, and I will bring in our three judges. So normally this is the point where I would present some fact checks, but truth be told, this is a show that has a production, and this production's happening at a really late hour. So I'm not going to kill time by doing that. Chris, I'm going to go straight to you. Who gets your vote, and what was your main selling point? As concise as you can hit it for me.
I went with Alan because I felt like he hit on the point. Why Alan brought up some point, I think he got lost in the fact, like, look at, how the credit reviews it now. And again, Alan like brought up, why he moved it, but, people did love it, but their point of why Alan, but it doesn't work for. Alan.
Okay, Zach, down to you.
I also went with Alan, and the biggest thing is that it wasn't until the end where Alex really brought any counters against Aladdin, and that's kind of what sold me. Whereas Alan was able to say why the Jungle Book was a good adaptation, so that's why I went with Alan.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and put you guys in the back, and we'll go ahead and move on to question number 2. And question number 2 is in honor of next week. We have the movie White Bird, which is a sequel / spinoff to Wonder, because if any movie needed a sequel, it's Wonder. Remember that drama from a few years ago with Owen Wilson about the kid with the face? Yeah, that got a sequel. And it's directed by Mark Forrester, a guy who has been around for a number of years and directed a lot of solid films, who has a habit of jumping into franchises. He jumped into James Bond for a film. He directed the live-action remake of Winnie the Pooh. Yeah, he's got a really weird career. Seriously, go look that guy up. The same guy who made Christopher Robin made World War Z. It's a really weird sentence. But I think the one thing that Mark Forrester's films often have going for them is the performances, especially in the central area, are very, very strong. Whether it be the performances, what's a good example? Whether it be Finding Neverland is a great example that wasn't chosen of a really strong performance at the center of a film. So the question here is, what is the best performance in a film directed by Mark Forrester? With that said, Alex, you are up first this time around, so I'm going to give you the timer. And it starts when you begin speaking, sir.
Yeah, as mentioned, Mark Forrester is an eclectic director, to say the least. And part of that is that he has produced a bunch of really interesting acting performances, performances that have won Academy Awards, and also Machine Gun Preacher. But because he doesn't seem to have any interest in maintaining a particular style, he has cultivated this like weird grab bag. My personal favorite is Harold Crick, the main character of Stranger Than Fiction, played by the something Will Ferrell. And I think we can all agree that Will Ferrell is an interesting performer, a comedic actor, and it's always really interesting when comedians enter into that sort of dramatic performance. And Will Ferrell gives one of the absolute best performances of that year. And I would argue the best performance of any Mark Forrester film that I'd ever seen. He manages to be dramatic, happy, sad, emotional, all in this.
And time.
Yeah.
All right, Alan, over to you for the opening minute.
All right. You got to stay with me here. I made a very unorthodox choice. I'm just going to say it. Quantum of Solace, Daniel Craig as James Bond. I think Daniel Craig is probably the definitive James Bond, at least now. I know that gets a lot of hate. A lot of people had love. My original was Roger Moore, but I quickly went over to Daniel Craig. And I think after just watching all of the Craig Bond films, my favorite performance of his is, no joke, in Quantum of Solace. I think he just nails the what makes Bond a killing machine, somebody with a license to kill, and somebody who has just been horrendously scorned and just takes it all out, shows every bit of pathos for this character. A character that we've had different versions of, we've loved for millions and millions of years, not millions, but a long time. And I think he just nails it. Why we love Bond or compelled by him in Quantum of Solace.
And time. All right, Alex, back over to you. 2 minutes, sir.
Have I ever told you about my great actor test? I don't know if I mentioned it on this particular debate show. It's a little thing that I do when I suspect someone may be a great actor. It's easy. You can do it at home. Here's what you do. You watch a scene with that actor and someone that you know is a great actor. And at the end, if you'd rather go with actor A, who's usually in the lead performance, then they are a great actor. And even though Stranger Than Fiction is loaded with fantastic performances from actors that are incredible, Dustin Hoffman, Emma Thompson, show up for a bit. Maggie Gyllenhaal is fantastic in it. You do still want to hang out with Harold Crick because he is going through this intense situation. He has just been told that he is going to die. the person that is writing his life out has told him he is going to die. He actually gets a chance to meet the author of his life, and that author has confirmed that he's going to die. And he goes through a series of a romance, a freeing experience. He gets to quit his job. He gets to live his life finally, do all the things he wanted to. And at the end of it, he knows that he is going to die. Counter that by a James Bond performance who is ostensibly a one-up performance, meaning that, and while Daniel Craig is a talented actor, I'm not going to deny him that, Quantum is his worst James Bond film. It is a one-note performance, and that note is grief, and he's not even that good at it. If you want a stronger James Bond grief performance, try Skyfall, or even just the end of Casino Royale, or No Time to Die. All stronger James Bond performances, all entwined with grief, which is the main central pathos of the character anyway. And in Quantum of Solace, he is just stuck in this weird revenge cycle, and it's not even ultimately that interesting to look at. It's actually probably one of the worst Bond performances and films of the entire series, and it's a series that I've argued about on this show itself. I'm a big fan of James Bond myself. The thing is that Daniel Craig in Quantum of Solace is not close to the peak of that character, and honestly, even in relation to the other performances, he's only about in the middle of the pack, which makes it, unfortunately, a losing performance.
And time. All right, Alan, back over to you.
I think there are moments that are in the other Bond films that Daniel Craig really kind of shines, but I think with Quantum of Solace, he was still kind of learning the character. I think the first two scenes actually in Quantum of Solace are better for Bond than the second half of Casino Royale. I think you only see a bit of that grief that in the Casino Royale, but you really see what it drives him to do, because you're seeing different stages of it, and kind of like the grief through the death of a loved one. You're seeing these different stages. You go through these stages of grief, and you see all those stages in Quantum of Solace, and you see him make discoveries. And making discoveries that, okay, this is building to this is building to this, and things that he didn't think he was aware of that were happening. That how can this one incident lead to all of this? And you get to see him be smooth, be charming, that he usually is. But you don't think you're going to get that in the first couple scenes of that movie, because he's so driven with that anger, with that revenge, with that grief. But then when you see him turn on the charm in the boat scene, and then you go, oh, wow, that's okay. There's Bond. That's why this guy can do anything. That's why he's kind of like a chameleon. He can do all these different things. And it's kind of incredible to see. And we're talking about movies that are directed by Mark Forrester. Oh God, now I can't remember his name. Oh God, I can't remember the bad guy's name in Quantum of Solace. But Daniel Craig had a tremendous task of playing opposite kind of really bad actors. I mean, nobody in Quantum of Solace was really that great, but he was able to show all these compelling emotions and these stages of grief, given really kind of nothing to work with. So that's why I thought it was such an amazing performance, in that he has little to work with, but he's still able to shine through.
All right, and then just to run the quick check for you in case it comes up later, Matayu Amalric is the actor's name. All right, we're going to go into the 4-minute open discussion. It'll start when the first person speaks.
Yeah, I'm just going to push back a little bit here on the bad actors. I think you're including Judi Dench in that, and I will push back on you wholeheartedly. And listen, and again, I will give Daniel Craig credit where credit is due. Daniel Craig is a good performer. However, he has certain faults, and that he's not a very expressive performer. In that, even in expressing grief, he is one note. He can do one face, but if you require anything more of him, then he is kind of out of line. And more to the point, even in grief, and I think we can both agree that grief is the central theme of Quantum of Solace. Right? We can both agree. If you're in the middle of grief, and I think the film picks up just a little bit after the death of Eva Green's character from Casino Royale, why would he take Strawberry Field like he takes her to bed like a few weeks after? If he's indeed in that kind of deep grief, that's just an odd thing for that character to do, which makes the character confusing, which makes it more difficult to play. And again, if you're talking about a performance that is like supposed to be stealing the show from bad actors, you can't have it both ways. Either he is a fantastic performer in a bad movie, or he's just a mid performer. It's just a mid performance from him.
I think he's going through a different, that's the acceptance phase with the Strawberry Fields thing. You get to see him be charming, kind of lure her. And then that's what James Bond does. And for somebody who has a license to kill, whose killing is their job, people are going to die around you. He was willing to give all that up, yes. And okay, you know what? I'm really angry about this. I was going to give all this up for this. And that he was able to show that, and then show that playful side. Oh, I need this from this person. I'm going to get what I want because I've accepted now that this person is gone out of my life. I'm back into this role. And so he was able to go into it and then kind of go with a little bit of gusto. I think Daniel Craig is a subtle actor. I don't think he's one note. I think he's very subtle. I think he uses nonverbals very, very well. He's obviously, and I don't think he's a subtle actor. If you look at Knives Out, he's tremendous in that film and doing all kinds of different things. I think he's a lot more subtle than other performances with Bond in particular, because he's saying so much with nonverbals. I mean, just the look of his eyes and the way he uses his eyes, you can tell if he's angry, if he's thoughtful, if he's introspective. You can tell different things through that.
All right. But the look of his eye is all I've got. I've got nothing in the performance that says, other than the look in his eye, is that he's in grief. Meanwhile, with Harold Crick, you've got a character that is going through all of the emotions that humans can possibly go through. He's exploring friendship. He's exploring. No, he's exploring a romantic relationship with Maggie Gyllenhaal. He's exploring friendship with Dave from work. He is exploring a new hobby with the guitar. He is grief-stricken about his possible death. He goes through anger when his apartment is destroyed. There's a lot of things that Harold Crick goes through that I think you're giving Will Ferrell not enough credit for, whereas I think people think of him as a comedian. As a comedic actor, he is a very good comedic actor, but I think he's actually best as an anti-comedian, a more like a Steve Martin role. Which is what he plays here in another movie called The Other Guys, where it's not, the point is not that it's funny. The point is that it's happening to someone who refuses to believe that it's funny. And I think that is the thing that makes the Stranger Than Fiction a stronger performance, is that all of this stuff is happening to somebody that's reacting to it actively, as opposed to Daniel Craig, who is sitting there buried in his emotions. And sitting there buried in your emotions is a wonderful thing for a side character to do, but in a lead character, it just makes him passive.
But I think with Daniel Craig's Bond, you believe you're going through this journey with Bond. With Will Ferrell, I'm going through this journey because Will Ferrell, he can do a little bit of emotional stuff, okay, but it's still Will Ferrell. It's not a character that we love, we know, and we believe that character is who I'm watching.
And time. All right, we have 1 minute left on the clock for each competitor. Alex, you're up first.
I object to the notion that Will Ferrell is not a beloved actor. In fact, I would say that most people would put Will Ferrell above Daniel Craig on actors that they love more. I would just say that Harold Crick is a more complicated performance to do, and it's done by someone that we actually don't have very high expectations of an actor at all, and to be able to hang in there with heavy hitters like Dustin Hoffman, like Emma Thompson, this shows that Will Ferrell can be the A player on an amazing film, whereas Daniel Craig is a mid performer in perhaps definitely the worst of these films in his set, and let alone among Mark Forrester's set. It's just a unfortunate performance. He's relegated to be the second behind Camilla's journey, who is an actual revenge story, whereas his Bond's revenge is actually done fairly early in the movie, as he catches his bad guy right away. He's just stuck in this other plot for Camilla's sake.
And time. All right, Alan, you have one last minute for the round.
I think Will Ferrell is a good performer, but I never not know I'm watching Will Ferrell. With Craig's Bond, I believe I'm watching James Bond, this character, and that's what you want. You want to go through this journey with this performer, believing this character that they've created, that they have. And I, no doubt, am ever pulled out and going, oh, that's a Daniel Craig thing. Nope, that's James Bond. And his performance is what's taking me on that journey as this character. and in creating this, telling these stories with him, in particular this one with Quantum of Solace, which I think, again, all of his nonverbals and his body movement. You can really tell what stage he's in with just what he does with his body, the way he carries his center through space, the way his arms shrug. It's just kind of amazing, all the physicality that we see. I mean, it's not just his eyes, it's all the physicality. We see this performer creating a character that we know and love and take that journey with him.
And time. All right. Guys, I have to say, genuinely, that might be the best debate we've had about acting on this show. Talking about acting within a film is one of the more nuanced things to discuss. Oftentimes it drifts off into fully talking about the film itself. So great job to both of you on this. But there is unfortunately only one winner, so I will sit you both in the back and I will bring our judges in. Zach, I'm going to go to you. Who gets your vote and what was the main selling point of the argument?
I'm going to go with Alex on this one. It's kind of the same as the first one in reverse in terms of, like, I felt like even though Alan had some good arguments for Daniel Craig, he didn't have enough against Will Ferrell and his performance to really give him the point for me. So that's why I'm going with Alex.
All right. And then Andrea, down to you.
I'm also going to have to vote for Alex on this one. Almost the same sentiment as Zach here. I was also looking for more attacks against Will Ferrell's performance because Alex was able to really focus on the possible things was really able to focus on the performance against Daniel Craig and James Bond. So I'm going to have to give it to Alex.
All right. Well, judges, thank you guys so much. I'll go ahead and sit you in the back and bring the competitors in as we will move on to question number 3. And we're going to be moving into the realm of the Monsterverse, which, despite the fact that for a brief moment it looked like it might be ending after Godzilla vs. Kong, the rights were up in the air. Nobody really knew what was happening. Legendary Pictures have secured control of the franchise for the foreseeable future. Not only has a sequel to Godzilla vs. Kong entered production under the direction of Adam Wingard, we also have a show for Apple TV in development, and I believe it might also be filming too, which is going to be featuring the Russell father and son pairing of Kurt and Wyatt, which will be interesting to see. So it's clearly something that's going to be moving forward, and what's interesting is Adam Wingard is actually the first director to repeat. So far, this franchise has had 4 films and 4 different directors, and those being Gareth Edwards. Evans is the other guy. Yeah, Gareth Edwards, Michael Dougherty, Adam Wingard, of course, and Jordan Vogt-Roberts on Kong Skull Island. So the question here is, if obviously this film, we know we're keeping Wingard, but going forward, we know there's going to be more. Which modern director would be the best pick to make a Monsterverse film? Now, I should say, by modern director, I just mean somebody working. We're not going to sit here and try and pitch as to why, I don't know. I guess technically he counts as working, but we're not pitching like Woody Allen, who hasn't been relevant in about 10 years and not a creep in about 30. So we're talking about directors that are still working today. With that said, though, Alan, you're back up first, so I'll give you the timer, and it will start when you begin speaking.
Well, you just gave me a great answer. I changed it. Woody Allen. No. I think I'm a huge Godzilla fan. That is why we are talking about the Monsterverse. And I would love to see, I've wanted to see for many, many years, my absolute favorite director of all time, hands down, is Takashi Miike. I think Miike's visual style, I think his way of telling every single kind of story with his, just amazing array of films and different kinds of films that he's done. He's just perfect for a Monsterverse film. We've seen him do the crazy kind of with the Yokai War. We've seen him do crazy fairies and fantasy kind of stuff. I want to see him tackle, and I want to see him bring back the roots of the true Monsterverse with that original Godzilla, making Godzilla scary, making it a tragedy, making it horrific. I want to see that, and I think Takashi Miike is the one to do it. He can bring it all together and give us a scary monster film once again.
And time. So, genuine question: does the Woody Allen Godzilla film end with Godzilla sleeping with Kong's daughter, or
obviously, yes, that's of course.
Okay, all right. Just had to make sure. Woody, don't come after me. You still have more than me, unfortunately. Alex, I'm going to go over to you with your pick. 1 minute on the clock.
All right, picture it. You've been asked who should be the next modern director to make a MonsterVerse film. Who'd you think of first? Not you. You thought of Guillermo del Toro, and it's probably the right answer. Guillermo del Toro is the monster guy. There is no one else in the world that we know of that treats monsters with the amount of love and respect that Guillermo del Toro does. I mean, the man did it for an Academy Award. That's how much he loves monsters. And he's been the only person consistently doing it going back as far as the early 90s. He's been doing it his entire career. His entire career is directing, producing, and writing pieces to show off not only how cool, but how dangerous, how scary, but also how beautiful monsters can be. And that is ultimately the story of Godzilla, the story of the entire MonsterVerse: the beauty, the nature, the savagery, the violence, and yes, the humanity of these monsters.
And time. And with that, in 2 minutes, you guys have given this universe more nuance than 4 films have. That said, let's continue to try. Alan, 2 minutes. I'm sorry, it's true, and I like those movies. Alan, 2 minutes on the clock, sir.
Del Toro is great with monsters, but on a smaller scale. We've already seen his kaiju movie with Pacific Rim, and quite frankly, it was not great. Mainly because I want to see the monsters. The Pacific Rim, his camera is all up in there. We're seeing elbows, we're seeing body parts, and we're seeing stuff like that. We saw one cool shot of a sword coming out of nowhere and hitting him, but then that was the only back thing we saw. The rest was all close up and shaky cam, and I don't want to see that anymore. I've seen enough of those monster films like that. I want to see the actual destruction, the devastation. I want to take it in all, but I want to see it whole frame. I want to see the monster going through the town, destroying the town, and the people's reaction to this. I want to see that devastation. It might be beautiful, but it's also horrific, and I don't want to be in that place. I can't put myself in that place with shaky cam, and I'm all like this. I want to see it so I can realize how horrible and terrifying it is. And Takashi Miike, the way he is able to steady a shot, use a shot, slow motion zooms and cuts out, and just absolutely linger on a moment, savor a moment, makes it beautiful and crazy and great and fantastic, and you can't escape it. I want to see a monster film that I can't escape. And with as fun as some of the monster films, the fighting has been, I want to go back to something horrific. I want to go back to something that's more steady, more psychological. And I think seeing that aspect with Takashi Miike, his ability to get inside the minds of devastation and people that have suffered and been through sorrow, I want to see that story. And not just a bunch of monsters fighting in beautiful ways and poses that I can't quite see because the camera is too close. Back it up. Let me see the devastation. Let me revel in this and take me back to fear and terror in a grander scape and not all close up, shaky cam. Del Toro can tell the story of the creature from the Black Lagoon. Go ahead, do that. But leave Godzilla to Takashi Miike. I want to see that.
Time. All right, Alex, back over to you.
I have lived long enough on this earth that I can die tomorrow because someone has just questioned Guillermo del Toro's aesthetic abilities. That's what just happened. I have no problem with Takashi Miike as a director. He's actually a fine director. What I will say is that he is a small director. He's a small-time director. And unfortunately, being in this community, that I know exactly how movies get made. I know what happens when a foreign director comes without much fanfare or acclaim. They get eaten alive by the American studio system. The truth is, the movie that you want Takashi Miike could never make at this current point in time, as opposed to Guillermo del Toro, who absolutely could make the movie that he is going to. If Guillermo del Toro signs on the dotted line to make a movie for whoever, Guillermo del Toro is getting exactly everything he wants and more out of the deal. You talk about Pacific Rim, yeah, you're talking about someone that has experienced the pitfalls and could do perhaps a better job. That being said, Takashi Miike is barely even considered. Most of his movies, I think you would agree, are actually the ones that he's crossover hit are actually more thrillers than anything else, which is fine, but they're not scaled films necessarily. And the few that he does have are actually probably less successful and less in number than the ones that he actually has that are the ones that are branded. Now, back to Pacific Rim, you kind of dug on it for a minute, but Pacific Rim is not just a kaiju film. It is actually a tribute to like 3 or 4 different genres: the kaiju genre, the anime genre, the mecha genre. And if we're doing a MonsterVerse film, that is, I mean, a scratch in the barrel of the amount of things that you could do. They set up in the last one King Ghidorah, but there is an entire litany of films and MonsterVerse monsters that you could pull from, any of whom would be fantastic villains for a Godzilla or any other kind of MonsterVerse film.
All right, that'll be it for Alex's 2 minutes. We're going to go ahead and go into the 4-minute open discussion. Timer starts when the first person speaks.
I think that smaller scale you were talking about that Miike does, it would be perfect with a kaiju film or a Godzilla film in particular, because that's where Godzilla came from. The original, still the best Godzilla film is that original Gojira, the 1954 Japanese classic. It had everything that I kind of want. Personally, I don't really need any other Godzilla film. I can go back to that one. But if I want to see a modern take on it with a director that has that sensibility and can really put that and kind of make it tenfold in a way that really kind of shakes me as a film goer, been to a million films, seen a million different times of films. I want to be taken back to that modern miracle of going into the cinema and having that experience. And I think Takashi Miike is perfect for that. And I don't think the studio would eat him alive. I think the studio's scared of him.
Well, that's exactly what would happen. And I'm actually going to stop you right there, because you've said something that's really blown my mind. You either want it small and intimate like the 1954 film, or do you want something that's going to be successful now? Because the 1954 film was perfect for 1954, but it's not perfect for right now. And we're arguing about modern directors. The fact of the matter is, that film, 1954s, would never be made today. You either want a small, intimate film, or do you want to be able to see it in Revel in the Destruction, which is what you said earlier.
I think that small, intimate film about a monster can definitely, or about the devastation of something, can easily be successful nowadays. He's had a number of those films in Japan that are very successful. Sure, they haven't crossed over here to the modern American audience, but overseas he's extremely successful and makes 20 plus movies a year almost. So I think they could easily be successful because name recognition alone. MonsterVerse. Okay, and we've already seen, if we're talking about adding to this current MonsterVerse, we've seen the big spectacle, the big crazy, we've seen all that. Now let's see something that really shows, okay, here's devastation. I thought that 2014 Godzilla was going to be that, but ended up not being that, because we got this added story with the Mutos and this family, and what story are you telling? And that was filmed right over there.
I would argue that
that didn't work. So
the Godzilla film of 2014 even paled in comparison to something like Shin Godzilla, and Shin Godzilla wasn't a crossover hit either. Takeshi Miike is not a crossover star just yet. He could potentially have a breakout hit, and if he does, good for him. But he has no reason to have a breakout hit. He doesn't have an Oscar. Hang on. He doesn't have an Oscar nomination. He doesn't have a big successful hit. He doesn't have a Shudder hit. He doesn't have any anime crossover hits. The fact of the matter is, Takeshi Miike wouldn't come over because Takeshi Miike is not a name that people are interested in the States. Opposed to Guillermo del Toro, who actually did come from a foreign country and actually was a name that people had interested in, and who did prove himself on the awards circuit before he was given titles like Hellboy. You're talking about someone who has experience from the American system, which Takeshi Miike doesn't have. And even Guillermo del Toro has said that when he came to the States, the first thing that people did, that the American system did, was screw him over. In a Variety roundtable, he said that he got a horrible deal on Kronos because he had no negotiating power. He has negotiating power, but the fact of the matter is, Takeshi Miike does not. He is a good quantitative, but he is not the kind of director that is going to have any negotiating power. And once he's locked in, he's not going to need to walk away.
Who's going to make a more commercially viable film?
No, the thing is to say who is the modern director is the best
film that I want to see, and Takashi Miike is it. And Del Toro has already
it's not about you. It's about the best pick to make a MonsterVerse film. And the MonsterVerse film is something that you need to have care for the monster. Of course, you need to have grounds in destruction.
Del Toro's version has already been done with Godzilla versus Kong and the 2014. We've already seen that movie that Del Toro would make. Because
that is absolutely not Del Toro's vision.
The same thing. Godzilla versus Kong and Pacific Rim, the only difference was one was a robot and one was a gorilla. Takashi Miike, we've not seen that style of movie, so I think would be the best pick for a MonsterVerse, because
We haven't seen that style of movie from him either
yet in this MonsterVerse.
And time. All right, we got 1 minute left on the round, guys. Great back and forth there, but we got 1 minute to close. Alan, you are up first.
We haven't seen what Takashi Miike can do in this MonsterVerse, this current MonsterVerse. So I think he's a good pick for that, because I want to see a different type. If we're staying with this MonsterVerse, I've already seen Skull Island. I've already seen Godzilla versus Kong. I've already seen the 2014 Godzilla. I've seen these big spectacle kind of things. I want to see something that's going to mean more. The big spectacle is not just action, adventure, fun, yay. I want to see, oh my God, there's a giant monster and he's not the good guy. Okay, that 2014 Godzilla movie, he's not the good guy. In almost all of Takashi Miike's movies, Ichi the Killer, One Missed Call, Yukaza Apocalypse, Birdman of China. There's all these compelling, interesting villains that you're terrified of. You're absolutely terrified of. And he can make Godzilla that again, something terrifying, scary. And I want to see the weight of that, what that devastation does too. Or if it's multiple monsters. King of the Monsters had multiple monsters, but they weren't scary. It wasn't devastating. It was fun and exciting to see them. Okay, Takashi Miike can bring it back to something scary, something interesting, and that's a different version in this MonsterVerse we haven't seen yet.
And time. All right, Alex, back over to you for the final minute of the round.
I would actually push back on the whole needs an interesting villain. The fact of the matter is, these are monster mash movies. That's what they are at their heart. And if you want somebody that's going to push it to the highest example of that, someone's going to have respect for that as an art form, you are looking at Guillermo del Toro. Takashi Miike would be destroyed by the system. He is an unneeded quantity. In fact, he would probably be better at directing an American remake of Old Boy more than he would be needed as the director of the MonsterVerse movie. And as far as best pick to make a MonsterVerse movie, the fact of the matter is the way they pick it is they get a list of all the available directors that aren't working on projects right now, and they sign the most famous ones. That is what you need. That is what the American studio system, the Western studio system, which is the one that we reside in, it is a system built on name recognition, box office success, casting, and unfortunately, as the name recognition of the director is a huge part of that. If people hear that there's a new Guillermo del Toro movie, they get excited about it. And if they hear that it's a MonsterVerse movie directed by Guillermo del Toro, I guarantee you they'd be excited about it. That movie is a guaranteed box office success, critical success. It's just no way to fail.
And time. All right, guys. Again, another really great debate there. I'm going to go ahead and sit you both in the back as I bring our judges in to get to the deliberation. Andrea, I'm going to go to you first. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point of the round?
This was very close. It actually came down to the closing arguments on both sides. But I'd have to go with Alex just because he was able to specify a lot more about the industry itself and what would happen if, for example, a new director comes in that's untested and that really doesn't have that much experience in making American films. So I'd have to go with Alex on that one.
All right, Chris, down to you.
Yeah, kind of in the same direction. It came close. I would put Alan for a second, but I would pull in the closing second, pointing out, that you have to get a big name to make a viable movie, and depends on what pick for a MonsterVerse movie. But the directors haven't done one, but it came down to how Alex would even answer that question.
All right, guys, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and move on to the fourth and final question of the main game. All right, let's go ahead and get into this. And question number 4, as we've had so far with all these tournament matches, to kind of spread the love around, we had a lot of these sent in. It is a viewer-submitted question. Now, to give my brief little rundown here, if you happen to be watching this, or you're a player, or you're a judge, or whoever, and you happen to have a question that you want to see some players debate, go ahead. My email is officialaarinkanoll@gmail.com. Email your questions to me, however many. Also email me your name, because if I don't know who is sending them, then they won't be used, just in case it is a competitor trying to get their own question. Not going to happen. But if there's something you want to see debated, don't be afraid to send it in. I can't guarantee when it'll be used, but I can guarantee that they will all be used. And it wasn't even intentional. Sometimes I make little mistakes or snafus when I put the questions together. It was not intentional to put two different acting questions into one match. However, after seeing the first round, I'm kind of glad that you guys did get this one because it is a deep question, and I'm curious to see where this heads. So, as submitted by Austin Howell, the question here is, what is the biggest Oscar acting snub of the 2010s? Obviously, the most recent decade for films. Every single year, there are 20 nominations in acting and 20 nominations only at what is considered overall the biggest award that you could possibly win. What is the biggest snub? And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Alex, who is up first on this round. The timer will start when you begin speaking.
When discussing the most important movies of the decade of the 2010s, it's actually a really tough conversation. A lot of fantastic movies, a lot of fantastic performance, a lot of unfortunate snubs. In my opinion, the most critical of which was actually from, I would say, my favorite film of the entire decade. A lot of people's favorite film of the entire decade, The Social Network. And specifically, I'm talking about Andrew Garfield as Eduardo Saverin in a really unfortunate snub. The entire film hinges on this friendship, this relationship between these two people. And yes, it is heavily fictionalized because unfortunately the true relationship of those two is not as interesting as it might appear to be. But Andrew Garfield proved his mettle by being not only a very sympathetic character, but by also being a rageful, really almost bordering on bitter kind of ex-friend, the kind of falling out that you regret several years down the line, and the kind of friendship that is lost, unfortunately.
And time. All right. Alan, over to you, sir. You have an opening minute on the clock.
I chose somebody who I think is fantastic, and I watch just about every film that she's in, and I've always been compelled by her, and I don't think she's ever gotten really the recognition she deserves. And I went with Kerry Washington in Django Unchained, playing Broomhilda. I think she's absolutely stunning, and I was really shocked. I know Christoph Waltz, everybody remembers him from that film, but my God, she was absolutely compelling. Showed every range of emotion in a character that is so hard to understand, the depth and the pain and the joy and the love and the excitement, all those things going through something that we're so far removed from. And she just brought it to life and really took us on this journey. And a relative limited amount of screen time too. I thought she was absolutely brilliant and does not get nearly the accolades that she deserves.
All right, so it's Andrew Garfield versus Kerry Washington. Alex, back over to you, sir.
So when discussing Kerry Washington, who I absolutely agree is a fantastic performer, underrated in some respects, but what she is in that film is the object to be gained, whereas Andrew Garfield is an embattled ex-friend who is, by the way, present in the entirety of the film, making him, not giving him the supporting performance snub for an entire film's worth of work, where he's holding up half of that film, trying to argue logic into the head of someone who's unfortunately been poisoned by, as of all people, as of course it would be, Justin Timberlake. Andrew Garfield does his best to be a mediating performer amongst a group of hotheads, a human against a calculator, a person against a robot, which is ultimately what Jesse Eisenberg's interpretation of Mark Zuckerberg is. And he brings that really humanizing part of that film, the kind that you really need to connect to, because Justin Timberlake is playing a caricature of a person, and Jesse Eisenberg is playing a person who I think actually might be a caricature in Mark Zuckerberg. So you really need that balance, which is something that Andrew Garfield brings in spades. Kerry Washington has received lots of laurels for her work, not in Django Unchained. She has received a lot of critical acclaim for performances in television and film, including, I think she has a Golden Globe nomination and a SAG nomination. Fact of the matter is that those are not as easily attained as some people might think. It's actually incredibly hard work to get there. Fact of the matter is she's just not in Django Unchained enough to justify, in a large enough role to justify giving her a nomination, especially not in a really stacked year.
And time. All right, Alan, back over to you.
She was in it enough to make it count, to make it matter. And the scenes she did, she was compelling enough that she took us on the journey of this character, what might have been a minor character, but was extremely important to the through line of the story. And when we finally get to meet her and see her struggles and her tribulations, it's well paid off and beyond. And we get to have discoveries with her. We feel like we know her as soon as we meet her, and then we get to see what happens with her. And she did the most amazing work, the most subtle work in 2 different languages. The scene with her and Christoph Waltz, and they're speaking German, is absolutely amazing because she's making discoveries both verbally and non-verbally, and in not the actor's native tongue, learning the German for this scene where she's making discoveries. Why is this person talking to me? What's happening now? Oh my God, is this going to be true? And then we get to see this beautiful, amazing payoff when she sees him, Django, for the first time. And it's just incredible. And we see all of this through her face, through her body language, and through her thought process as she's discovering what's happening in this one scene. And that's just one scene that's absolutely compelling and amazing. Andrew Garfield is great, but that whiny, bitter, oh my gosh, I got played on, we've seen that. And the taste in my mouth, and this is a personal thing I know, but the taste in my mouth was enough with the prequels that when I saw that he's playing that guy again, oh no, okay. And there were so many other great performances in The Social Network that, yes, they outshined Andrew Garfield in that. So I don't think it was, he was snubbed at all. It was fine, but we've seen it before and it wasn't that good in other things. Andrew Garfield later on has been much, much better, but I don't think he was snubbed. I think we didn't see anything out of that was better.
All right, we're going into the 4-minute open discussion. Timer starts when the first competitor speaks.
When you mean the prequels, do you mean the Star Wars?
Of course.
Okay, just to be clear, I think it is interesting to compare Hayden Christensen to Andrew Garfield, because Andrew Garfield is better in almost every way, except for the fact that Hayden Christensen is perhaps a little bit more intimidating. I would say that Eduardo Saverin is not an intimidating character. He is, by rights, a businessman. He is a student at Harvard. He's a student that gets roped into this kind of cockamamie website idea. And yeah, he's incredibly bitter because this version of this character has lost his best friend, a potentially $1 billion idea, and all in the word of some guy that he never trusted all along, that he was preaching against the entire time. I would argue that is the performance. That is exactly what the performance calls for. Now, you're talking about Kerry Washington performing another language. I'll admit it's impressive to be able to learn lines of German and speak them fluently. German is not an easy language to learn. It is also not easy to perform outside of an actor's native accent, which Andrew Garfield does in almost all of his performances.
Yes, but you can really hear the slip-ups in it. You really can. It was the same thing with his Spider-Man. You could really hear, and granted, he didn't have as much to do dialectically wise as he did with Spider-Man because he was trying to do that Queens thing. But you can hear it slip. There were times, especially when he gets really, really emotional, which he doesn't go too bad, but you can hear the slip. You can hear his native dialect come out. And with Carrie, especially with the scene when we're talking about she's using the other language, there's no slips. She's making discoveries verbally, and it sounds perfect as if this character speaks this language as well. And there's no slip-ups, and it's absolutely amazing. And we see her go on such a journey. The scene where she is being whipped, it is one of the most traumatizing, terrifying things ever, and it has to do with her performance in that scene, a scene that, we pray no one ever has to go through anything like that. And we're seeing that, and we're seeing what it's doing her, shattering her, and it's absolutely amazing. And the boldness of that, the bigness of that, going to her fear of Steven when he's asking her, do you know him? Do you know that guy? And the terror in her face, but she can't show it to him in that moment, is as subtle and amazing as the broad terror and horror in her being whipped. And it's such an amazing thing that I didn't see anything in the actual nominees of all the other supporters that matched that magnitude and that amazing ability to perform.
I just want to talk about something that you said earlier, and that is time spent in the character. And it's not fair to compare Kerry Washington's, let's say 20 minutes, and I don't know the exact time she's in the film, let's say maybe 15, 20 minutes of a 2-hour plus film. That is not comparable to the amount of time that Andrew Garfield had to spend in the Spider-Man character and in the character of Eduardo Saverin. That is just not a fair thing to complain about, especially since most people that would be watching Django Unchained wouldn't be speaking German. So we wouldn't be able to pick up the differences in dialect at, just watching the film. I mean, you said earlier that you've seen whiny, whatever performances in the prequels. Something terrible happens to a character in a Tarantino film and almost every single time. People straight get tortured in Tarantino films. That's something we've seen every single time. We've seen it from that director constantly. So that is not necessarily the best of points either. So
but we don't really get taken on the journey in the same way. If we're expecting,
right, but she's not broken at the end either.
She's
still got spirit. She's still fighting at the end of the movie. So even what you said that she's breaking, she's not breaking. She's incredibly resilient, which goes against
which is another amazing aspect. We're seeing that shift too.
All right, we got 1 minute left on the round for each competitor. Alex, you are up first when you're ready.
I'm absolutely not saying that Kerry Washington didn't do her level part in Django Unchained. I'm absolutely not saying that. I think she is a fine performer. However, cuts have to be made somewhere along the line. And the truth of the matter is she was stacked in a difficult year. She was stacked in a year that had, just to include some of the names here, Anne Hathaway, Amy Adams, Sally Field, Helen Hunt, and Jackie Weaver, some incredible heavy hitters there. Whereas Andrew Garfield put on one of the best performances in one of the best movies of one of the toughest years of the entire decade, going up against J.K. Simmons, Robert Duvall, Ethan Hawke, Edward Norton, and Mark Ruffalo, all incredible heavy hitters, all people that you would be lucky to have headlining your film. But even so, Eduardo Saverin, played by Andrew Garfield, just shines and is a character that people come back to over and over and over again. And it's a performer that we keep coming back to because, and he was just first noticed, Fincher was really brought him into a new spotlight because of that character, and he got absolutely no recognition for it. Whereas Kerry Washington, people noticed.
And time. All right, Alan, back over to you for the final minute of the round.
You just did a good job listing all the other nominees up against the actual nominees against Andrew Garfield, because they were heavier hitters and they did a better job in those movies. They didn't take us on the journey. And even in Social Network, there were other supporting characters that were outshining Andrew Garfield's character in that movie. There's nothing in the nominees, and why I think it's a snub of supporting actress, that even pales to what Kerry Washington was doing. And even if you're going to give her 20 minutes of screen time in that movie, nobody else did that compelling of a job. It's not really a matter of the amount of screen time in a film. It's the impression that you make, and it's the journey that you take the audience on. And I think Kerry Washington was undeniable in Django Unchained and taking the audience on that journey and really making us believe, okay, this is the character. This is worth the fight that these other characters are going through the whole time. This is it. And it's absolutely beautiful, amazing. And we get to see her run the whole gamut of human emotion in a really beautiful way.
Time. All right. We're going to go ahead, guys. Again, another excellent debate from both of you. I'm going to go ahead and put you in the back, and we will bring the judges in for the deliberation. Chris, up to you. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point? Chris, you there? Hello? We have lost Chris. All right, Zach, I'm going to go to you first instead. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
Okay.
I am going with Alan on this one. And one of the points that he made is that even with limited screen time, Kerry Washington was compelling and did take us on a journey. And I did kind of want to also add that Anthony Hopkins was only in Silence of the Lambs for 15 minutes and got a best actor win. So sometimes screen time is not indicative of that. So I went with Alan.
All right, and then Diaz, I will go down to you next. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point? Chris, you there? Hello? All right, Andrea, I'm going to move over to you instead while Chris gets his stuff figured out. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point? You're muted.
Okay. My vote would also have to go with Alan. I think he was able to really counter a lot of the arguments that were being thrown against his own argument. So I'm gonna have to go with Alan on this one.
Okay. All right. Judges, thank you guys so much. I'm going to go ahead and put you guys in the back as we will go ahead and bring the competitors back in. All right, guys. So with that, it is a 2-2 tie. So we're going to go ahead and go into the blind round. Here is how this one works. For the blind round, the question is something that the competitors have no preemptive guess as to what it is. It'll be randomly assigned per match. The way that it works is I will ask you guys a general prompt first. So my example that I've gone with pre-Oscar slap was name me a Will Smith movie. You will then name a film that qualifies. Following that, I will reveal the actual question to you, at which point, whether or not you feel it 100% fits your answer, you have to do your best to debate it. And we have seen plenty of times where what some people would say is the wrong answer has won the debate. Following that, you guys will get a couple of minutes to put together some prep. We'll bring you back in. The actual debate works the same way as it did before. We're not going to change that up on you. All right, so do you guys have any questions, or are we good to go?
Good.
Okay. All right, so the way this blind round is going to work is we're going to be doing it slightly different. Now, I'm going to read it out loud before I put it on the screen, just because Alan is driving. I don't want him to have to look away and read something to answer. So I'm going to name you 4 options in a multiple choice almost, and you are going to pick one of them, okay? All right, so your blind round prompt is, pick one of the 4 Star Wars trilogies, the originals, the prequels, the sequels, or the spin-offs.
Do we just answer?
Yep.
I'll pick the sequels.
What did you say first, Alex? Because you did answer
Sequels.
first. Okay, so Alex did actually get the sequels in right before you.
I'll go OGs.
Okay, so we have the sequels versus the originals. Guys, your question is, what is the best of the 4 Star Wars trilogies? All right, so with that said, we're going to go off screen for a couple of minutes for these guys to prepare. For you at home, it's only going to be about 20 seconds of elevator music, so we'll be right back with the blind round. And we are back. We'll go ahead and get into this. We have the question, of course, is what is the best of the 4 Star Wars trilogies, in quotes, because technically one of them wasn't a proper trilogy, but there are 3 films, so I counted it. But that's not a problem tonight because we have the prequels versus the originals. Alex, because you answered first, you are going to get to go first.
Yeah.
So if you guys are ready to go, I will pull up the timer and we'll get this battle underway. All right. And I want to say you guys have both been excellent tonight. So obviously when it's all down to one question, best of luck to the both of you. The timer will start, Alex, when you begin speaking.
It is highly controversial to say that the sequel trilogy is better than the original trilogy. I think that these are the two obvious ones that are in contention. However, what I will say about the sequel trilogy is that it is, in my opinion, humble opinion, honest and truly stated fact. You can fact check me on it. Letterboxd. Let's love Star Wars. The truth of the matter is, I've always held in high regard the sequels much more than I do the original trilogy. I think that they are better photographed, better acted, more successful, more interesting films. When I say more interesting, I mean story-wise and visually. I think that the original trilogy, while had a lot of good, was ultimately saved, and this is, again, a matter of public record, saved by having fantastic producers, a fantastic score, and one or two rising stars who actually went on to do something and were incredibly successful, and they were able to come back to it because it was incredibly successful. But the fact of the matter is that I think over time people will really appreciate the quality of the sequel trilogy as well, as much as, in fact, if not more than the original trilogy, as I have.
And time. All right, Alan, over to you.
We wouldn't have a sequel, a prequel, or spin-offs without the original. The original Star Wars films, the trilogy, are synonymous with life as love and religion. I mean, really, everybody on the planet almost knows what Star Wars is, and it's because of those three original films. Those three original films also changed filmmaking. It changed special effects. It changed miniatures. It changed so much about the movie making process, as well as stories that were emulated from the actual stories of the films themselves. You can't have a sidekick, Chewbacca and Han Solo, without thinking of Chewbacca and Han Solo. You can't have any of those things. A princess, the first princess most people think of, it's not a Disney princess, is Princess Leia. The Force, my God, the Force is as synonymous with people as magic with Harry Potter. And it's because of those three original films. They defined it all and are still the best.
Time. All right, back over to you, Alex.
Speaking very quickly about the story of the films, the fact of the matter is the stories, you can start writing them at any point in time. In fact, the stories only got more complex once you left the original trilogy. Truthfully, the Star Wars part of war is the political element, and that is something that is entirely missing. You call it Star Wars, there's only a few select battles shown. You are seeing way more battles outside of the original trilogy, primarily the sequel trilogy. You see way more of what it is to be actually these characters involved in turmoil. You can, by the way, absolutely pick up watching Star Wars at any point in the saga. Personally, I started watching with Revenge of the Sith. That was my entry point, and it was a perfectly acceptable entry point. The Force Awakens is an entirely new story, an entirely new generation that, yes, does go back to popular characters. But once again, as I've said, popularity does not equal quality. That's just not the way it works. And honestly, you could have had those characters at any given point in time. You could still have a Princess Leia and have her be anything. The way the filmmaking process works is that if you say it and the film implies it and does it well enough, you can make any character work. Making Luke Skywalker the most important character in the galaxy, finding Luke Skywalker, being able to access the Force, that could have been done if you had started with The Force Awakens, which, by the way, that was a lot of people's entry point into the saga. The Force, again, it is kind of a mute concept, but it is something that you could describe as intangible. It has been described as a lot of things over the years. Excuse me. The fact of the matter is that the entirety of what was the original trilogy is just George Lucas getting his favorite stuff and fitting it into the narrow Joseph Campbell hero's myth or hero's journey box, and just making it go into that one direction, which is why ultimately the stories of the original trilogy kind of fall flat and are entirely uninteresting, with the exception of a few, let's say, plot twists.
And time. All right, Alan, back over to you.
Well, George Lucas's favorite stuff became everybody's favorite stuff. Everybody's a fan of Star Wars, almost no matter what. And again, it's because of these three original films the sequels are just rehashes of the same exact stories. Force Awakens is just A New Hope redone. The Last Jedi is a little bit of Empire and a little bit of Return of the Jedi. And then Rise of Skywalker is just a, what the hell do we have left? Oh, let's bring back the bad guy from Return of the Jedi. They're rehashes and poorly told, quite frankly, poorly told rehashes of the original stories of the original trilogy. And if you talk about epic space battles, the space battle in Return of the Jedi is still the best space battle. Sorry, my lens keeps going bad, but it's still the best space battle in all of the Star Wars films. The Last Jedi, the space battle was a slow car chase through space because one car was running out of gas. That was not exciting, not compelling, and didn't put the wars into Star Wars at all. Everything about the sequels was a rehash from the originals, including, oh, we've got a Death Star in The Force Awakens. Oh, guess what? The Death Star that was from the original film. And they already did a rehash of the Death Star in Return of the Jedi, so why do it for a fourth time? And then the major bad guy in Rise of Skywalker was, again, the same bad guy as Return of the Jedi, a rehash, better told in Return of the Jedi. And then you had Star Destroyers. Oh, Star Destroyers that had what? Death Star tech, which is, again, bringing up the Death Star. So no original ideas, no original stories from the sequels. And everything they pulled from the originals. The only thing we were waiting on with the sequels was how did the original characters we fell in love with through those stories, what happened to them? The new characters were not very compelling, not very interesting, and pale in comparison to the original stories or characters from the original trilogy. And I can see my second.
That is time. All right, we're going to go into the 4-minute open discussion. The timer will start when the first competitor speaks.
Yeah, I'm just going to push back on you really quickly because George Lucas' favorite stuff became completely unrecognizable. Stuff that would mean something to you or me becomes completely unrecognizable, becomes The Hidden Fortress, becomes City of a Thousand Planets, becomes Magnificent Seven. This is stuff that has absolutely no meaning because of George Lucas. Stuff that was once entirely famous that is now corporate IPs that people go, it's Star Wars like. You know what? It's not. Star Wars is that like. Nobody cares about Flash Gordon anymore. What I will say is that Star Wars of Wars, let me tell you about war. War is about management of resources. It is about how you allocate them. It is about keeping morale high, which is entirely what what the sequel trilogy is about. It is about maintaining morale by finding the most powerful person you can. And yes, on the other side, by having the most powerful weapons that you possibly can. That is how they keep morale. How do you keep as many of your soldiers alive in The Last Jedi? You run away as much as you can, and you go and flee as much as you can, as long as you can to be able to call reinforcements.
The plan, if you're trying to keep morale high, tell people the plan in The Last Jedi. And because nobody would tell everybody the plan, you got a mutiny that added another 15, 20 minutes of a story that was already told. And there were so many scenes in The Last Jedi that were superfluous to whatever the main story was supposed to be, which it was such a muddled mess. No one really knew what story they were telling. And
I'm glad you brought it up, because I will tell you exactly what story they were telling. I will tell you exactly what kind of story they were telling. They were telling a story to actually grow one of the side characters, which is something that the original trilogy never did. The original trilogy, something that I hate about the original trilogy is that all of their character development happens off screen. Han Solo only regresses when he is off screen. His relationship with Leia is absolute nonsense.
Yes, in the sequels, because he regressed to be backing a smuggler again, so it's not like he learned anything.
Because that's exactly what that character would do. So, as opposed to Poe and Finn, who maintain a friendship. Poe learns to be a decorated commander by making mistakes, which is absolutely what you do. Han learns absolutely nothing from his mistakes.
But we saw the growth of his character already in the original trilogy. We didn't know who Han Solo was for the sequel. If you would have taken a new character, I can get your point, but you took a character that was beloved and didn't do anything with him and didn't further the plot with it. The same way you did, what are we going to do with Luke? We're going to do the same thing we did with all the other Jedi, with Yoda, with everybody else. We're just going to make him hide. And, oh, no, he didn't learn anything. He didn't experience anything through the journey. And you got those journeys and those stories through the original trilogy.
And gave him an entirely good reason to be hidden. It gave him an entirely good reason for Leia to still be in charge, which she absolutely would be. For Han to be a scoundrel because he absolutely is that at heart.
Well, we gave that for Luke
to be afraid of the dark side because he absolutely was in the original trilogy. It is just building and improving on stuff that the original trilogy messed up. Fact of the matter is,
the original trilogy is kind of one of the most perfect stories, clear beginning, middle, and end, that's ever been in a film series. You have a clear beginning, middle, and end for all of the characters, a complete through line, and for what the original purpose was. This is a rebellion,
absolutely not
evil empire, and we saw them triumph, and we saw all the characters grow, and they all had a part to play. You can't tell me what Rey learned. Rey learned to do what? She didn't learn to go make a new Jedi temple. She learned to change her name, which she didn't have a name before. So she didn't learn anything.
Change the minds. She learned how to access her past, her actual past. Whereas in the original trilogy, nobody learns a thing on screen. The fact of the matter is, all the growth happens off screen. Lando made a general off screen. Han Solo made a commander off screen.
We saw
Luke Skywalker becomes a Jedi Knight off screen and then comes back in Return of the Jedi to be. He's proclaimed a Jedi Knight, but then told that he has to face Vader one last time. The fact of the matter is that it was saved by production, and only
we saw Obi-Wan.
Star Wars
everything
is the original
to do on screen.
Story of big battles, which is
we just saw Darth Vader learn on screen. We saw all the characters learn.
All right, so we have 1 minute left on the closing. Alex, you are up first when you're ready.
In my interpretation of what Star Wars is, and Star Wars is a lot of things, it is mass storytelling on a generational scale. The fact of the matter is, generations don't just exist within themselves. Generations pass over to each other, and in that aspect, the sequel trilogy is everything that Star Wars is, and will forever be. It is the characters all learning in a huge chemical reaction, all interacting with each other in such a way that, yes, you know what, they brought back some old stuff, and you know what, they introduced a bunch of new stuff that a lot of people ignored. They made the cinematography even better. They made the music just as well. They've got better performers. I'll say it. Oscar Isaac, Daisy Ridley, John Boyega ape anything that was done in the original trilogy. And yes, they made the cinematography even better. They just did an overall better job with the production, with the scale, with the size, with the scope. And you know what? Some people didn't like it, but it's only because they were clinging to their latent nostalgia.
All right, that is time. Alan, you got 1 minute left on the clock, sir.
The only reason the sequels exist is because of the original trilogy, and all they did was try to ape the original trilogy because they had no new stories to tell with these characters. They wasted Finn, who could have been a compelling, interesting character. They wasted and they regulated into some guy in the background. With Poe, Poe had a very interesting maybe backstory, but we never got to see it. Talk about not learning about anything on screen. All these mentions of things that he did in the past in Rise of Skywalker, but we never got to see that, and we never saw it in Last Jedi. We never saw it in Force Awakens. They wasted the original characters by telling rehashed stories with new characters that we didn't really get to know anything about. All of these mysteries about Rey and where she came from, and clearly it was pulled right out of JJ's rectum. Talking about Lucas taking things and pulling things. At least he pulled things from stories that were age-old and tested. JJ was pulling stuff right out of his butt and making Rey a Palpatine was the worst of the worst. So none of this would be up without the originals.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and put you guys in the back and bring our judges back into the screen. So unfortunately, at the time that we are recording this right now, there is I believe it is, I don't remember if it's classified now as a tropical storm or a hurricane, but there is a storm that is traversing through the ocean, and Andrea in the Philippines it is about to hit upon them very soon. So she is left just to kind of, be off the internet and make sure everything is good there. So I wish her the best. If another one happens to be around by the time this is uploaded, I wish anyone the best. Hurricane season's a bitch. I live in Florida. I would know. So with that said, I did take notes for this round. If it is needed, I will fill in as a third judge just to explain where she is. But Zach, I will go to you first. Who gets your vote, and what was the main selling point?
For me, I went with Alan more because he talked about how the sequels were kind of like a rehash of the originals, but just not done as well. And it just like the originals had so much better quality with different categories. So that's why I went with Alan.
Okay. And Chris, I go to you.
I should probably also went with Alan. I thought he did pull out example. He pulled out the space battle. He pulled out, the character journey. I think Alan was just trying to combat him, but he did pull out a lot of specific examples for the sequel trilogy to make it better than the original. Just saying everything happened off screen. I think Alan did pull out very example that made his argument stronger. Okay.
All right, guys, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and put you back behind the scenes because your winner by a final score of 3-2, it is Dr. Spaceman Alan Shepard coming out with the win. Alan, it's a great win, sir. You're through to the next round of the tournament. How are you feeling?
Why I always got to cut it close, man, and get into the speed round. Now the final round. Now that it's crazy. I'm not gonna lie. That was one of the best argued for those sequels that I've ever heard. Alex did an amazing job with that. That was absolutely incredible. So I thought, wow, man, he's gonna take this. See, this is gonna be good. I'm happy I squeezed it out. I'm super excited, super happy about it. He's a beast. That guy's awesome, compelling, interesting, got great arguments. And he was given, arguing those sequels was hard to do. But he did a great job of it. So, again, was lots of fun. Thanks for putting up with all my, in routes kind of stuff. You got to see a little bit of the background outside when I was driving home. But I appreciate it, man. It was fun. I'm happy to be here. Happy to move on.
Well, we will. I look forward to having you back, sir, in the next round of the tournament, which will be underway, I guess, as soon as everything's finished. But with that, sir, congratulations on the victory. I will drop you in behind the scenes as I go ahead and bring in your opponent, Alex Martinez. And Alex, yeah, man, unfortunately, it is a loss. There's not much room for error in this game, especially when it's so small in terms of points. But I have to give you respect, man. You're only 2 matches in, and you handled some great things today. As I said, acting is one of the most nuanced things I think I've seen people have to debate, and so often it's the simplest thing that'll throw it off. You did it twice, and you did it excellently, and you made a great case for a franchise of films that I think a lot of people would just instinctively want to overlook. I think the case of bringing like the realistic angle into the Del Toro element of actually looking at what would a studio do was a great insight. You had some great picks in here today, man. I think if anything, if this didn't pan out in a win for you, but I think this shows that it's just a stepping stone at the start. You could really go somewhere because I thought you had some great stuff, man. How are you feeling?
I feel fine. I always say that, like, if I'm awake, I'm probably thinking about movies. Unfortunately, this community takes up a huge amount of time, and Star Wars is just one of those things that occupies a huge amount of that time. So it is unfortunate that I didn't get that point, but ultimately, I can't be too terribly mad because Alan did an amazing job highlighting the strengths of the original trilogy. I mean, those are hard opinions to go up against. So huge congrats to him. I'd love to see him go all the way and win this tournament. I'd love him to go as far as he can because it'll just make me look good.
It does. It always benefits. Anyone who loses to the winner looks better because you can go, I lost to the guy who won. What am I supposed to do, right? Yeah. So yeah, man. So unfortunately, as with everybody who's kind of playing in this tournament, you know, the season is over for you, so to speak, until next year. But what are your thoughts overall on your 2 matches? And do you want to come back, or is it something you need to think about, or how you feeling there? No commitment, by the way. You're not committing to anything, but
no, it's a lot of fun. And one of the reasons I love being in this community is that we're all interested in the same broad thing, but we all have, you know, sometimes wildly different opinions. And I love to hear those, and I love to argue my side of things. And I have strong opinions, and I know a lot of other people do too. So I'll say it again: if I'm awake, I'm thinking about movies, and if I'm available, come see me.
all right. Well, I look forward to having you back, sir. An excellent showing over these 2 matches. And unfortunately, it didn't work out, but we will see you next time that we can here on the movie Battleground, as I will put you in the back, guys. So that is it. Yeah. Alan Shepard, he's had a history. As long as I've known him, Alan Shepard has had a history of doing well in tournaments, even when the odds look stacked against him. And I know a lot of people, you know, just speaking to people offhand, despite the inexperience, a lot of people backed Alex, and they showed support towards Alex. And he proved more than that he deserves that. He played an excellent game today, but Alan takes the edge on it and will move on to the next round of the tournament. And I look forward to seeing what he can do there. And I'm just putting a shot in the dark out there. I don't know if it's true. I look forward to writing another Monsterverse question, because goddamn, he keeps throwing them at me. So let's see what happens. Or maybe I'll put that research I did on that director to use. But with that said, guys, thank you so much for checking out this match. Please be sure to rate the video, subscribe, drop a comment below, interact with the channel. We have all sorts of matches going up. We have a playlist on the channel with every Battleground match in existence, but specifically this tournament will have a playlist of its own that you guys can go and click on if you want to watch each match as it progresses and uploads. I want to thank my 3 judges from today, Zach Shelton, Chris Diaz, and Andrea Malabag. Again, stay safe out there. Anybody who is in the path of a potential storm, as we're kind of heading into the last couple of months of hurricane season, it can get tough out there for people, so I hope people are staying safe as much as they possibly can. That said, we have some great matches coming up next week in the tournament. We have another excellent match. You'll get to see one of our judges, Zachary Shelton, come back and take on the ultimate uphill battle in Joe Hot Fuzz Fairley. And again, on behalf of everyone here at Movie Battleground, my name is Aaron Knoll, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.